I'll get that started. So we're recording the session today for our learning purposes. And thanks for that kind introduction. A transformational coaching model is what we're going to be taking a look at today. So let me start out by saying that I've been in the ministry since full-time since 1972. And we've been in either associate or lead pastor roles. And in the last 12 years, I was introduced to coaching. My wife was the one who made the introduction. And I have to say that I went into it with my heels dug in. So I'll give that as an introduction to how my early days were in coaching. My wife said, Nelson, this is so much you. And she had been doing coaching for several years already. So I said, okay, I'll go to a training. And it was one of those week-long intensives that I committed to. And I sat in the back just kind of watching, maybe even had my hands folded a bit, in the beginning. And end of day one, I said, Pam, I just don't know if this is for me. I just don't quite get it. And day two, same thing, same response to Pam. I'm glad I stuck it out because in the middle of the third day, it was like the light bulb came on and I made a shift and began to see how it was that anything that I was already doing or the leadership skills or the consulting skills that I had or the mentoring skills, it didn't negate any of those, but that this was an additional tool to add to the toolbox of my leadership. And so then this particular model was something, and as I moved forward, this model was something that really I needed to kind of help me. I'm kind of a visual picture person, and so just getting together one-to-one conversation was something that was like a bit challenging. I would find myself being distracted. I've grown in those things as a coach. One of the things that has helped me has been this model, and we call it the Nehemiah Response coaching model. So we're going to become familiar with this diagram today. My wife and I have written a book called the Nehemiah Response, a coaching model, and that's a picture of the cover there on this slide. And so we'll be looking at the metaphor. We'll be looking at these different parts. I want you to meet Jesse Mcbride. Jesse's on the training staff here at Relevant Ministry. He is also a credentialed ICF coach, and he's going to be sharing some today too. And so as you look on your screen right there, that's Jesse. Jesse, if you go ahead and say hello to everyone, I think because you got your mic on, you start saying something, you'll pop up to the front and everybody will see you. Say hi to everyone.
All right. Hello. Yes, my name is Jesse Mcbride. Glad to be here today. And also, and Nelson, there was just one quick question in the chat. I believe it was Mr. Randy asked if we would make the slides available after the class today.
Good question. We can do that, both the recording and I can make a PDF and get that out to everyone that's on the call. Thanks, Jesse. Continue to help me with that chat. As I got several things going here, I may not catch those just as quickly. And we do want to hear in the chat, and we want to hear from you. Okay, so if you're muted up, know how you're able to get off of mute real quickly, and feel free to step in. So we did, if you saw it on the email that you received that had the Zoom connection, I put a link to a Google Doc that was able to take you out electronically to this one page. And this would be that page if you got that. If you don't have it, you're going to be okay. Maybe have a piece of paper there, draw that model. We'll just kind of become familiar with it. And on this page, there may be some notes that you'll want to take as we move forward. So we'll refer to that page. I'd like to take just a minute. I want to share who we are a little bit more, what we do, and what brings us here today. In fact, Dave Wetzler would have been one of my first connections with NCD. I sent an email to him today. He's retired out in North Carolina. He wrote back the sweetest email. I shared with him, guess what I'm doing today? I'm going to be with Christoph and all of the coaches at NCD, and he was just thrilled to hear that today. So we want you to become familiar with us, and really even more important than that, we want to get to know you. As we get familiar with the chat, it would be really interesting to let us know where it is that you are from, what it is that you're doing with NCD, maybe just a short little note, and then particularly what we'd like to hear is your experience around coaching. That's going to be the topic today. So we're not going to exclude consulting or mentoring. We are going to talk about those differences, but then coaching. So as you understand coaching, and we could we even do this with like open mics right now? Feel free to take your mic and unmute it. And Jesse and I are credentialed with the International Coach Federation. And so it may be that you're familiar with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. Just wonder, even as you're looking at me here, just thumbs up. Have you heard of the ICF, the International Coaching Federation? Okay, so there's familiarity out there. Mark and Vincent and some others. How about training and credentialing, either with the ICF or some other training organizations? Go ahead and unmute and just say, I've been a coach for 5 years or 2 years or 10 years, or go ahead and feel free to unmute. Let's just even say hi to each other here these first few minutes. Coach training.
I'll go. Hi.
Yeah, Vincent. Yeah, good to hear.
Associate Natural Church Development Coach through the North American Division Evangelism Institute at Andrews University.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been a coach for 10 years, and I got coaching certified at the seminary.
Yeah, fantastic, Vincent. That's great. Well, listen, you step in and share throughout the morning here, or the time on this webinar. Anyone else? Your coach training, your coach experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say something. I'm from Norway, Kjetil, and a couple of years ago I took the training to be a coach for a couple of years here in Norway. But I'm not an ICF ready coach yet, so I'm just have to have some more practice before I can go that step.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was great to hear. It sounds like a great start. Yeah. I wonder, Kettle, is that how I say that?
Kjetil. Kjetil.
Okay.
Yeah.
How has that made a difference for you as you've applied some coaching skill to your work?
I have worked as a coach in NCD for some years, and I think this training has given me some new insights, and I think I've been I'm going to be. I think I'm a better coach and a better NCD trainer. With this experience and open questions and give some creativity and some so I think I've started to learn, but I have much more to go. So.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you have a good handle on what coaching is. Thanks for sharing that. So this model that you see in the book that resulted came from my own journey learning coaching. One of the things that you do that the ICF requires as well, along with hours of training and then a coaching log that you submit to receive your credential, is to experience mentor coaching with an approved mentor coach. I happen to have the privilege to do mine with Val Hastings, and he's an MCC, which is the highest level that you can receive. And I had written a book about our experience here in Gulfport, Mississippi with Hurricane Katrina. I was pastoring at the time, and in 2005, Hurricane Katrina came up through the Gulf and devastated Mississippi and Louisiana. It would have been New Orleans and us, and even all the way toward Mobile, Alabama. Gulfport, Mississippi, where I live, is right at the top of the Gulf. If you could picture the Gulf and Texas to the left and Florida to the right, at the very top of that curve would be Gulfport, Mississippi. That's where I am right now. And where we were in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina came in, and the landfall was just a few miles away from where we live. So our church at that time wasn't able to operate. We couldn't meet on Sunday. We got into recovery mode, and that went on for about 3 years. During that time, we had folks that came to our church as we hosted a disaster recovery plan for folks in our area, as so many did. Hundreds of thousands of people came to this area for recovery over the next several years. We were able to gather on Sunday morning and preach. And the Lord led me to preach through the book of Nehemiah. And I did that 2 times. And it seemed like every Sunday there was something about that rebuilding story of Nehemiah that gave us what we needed, answers for how to continue to respond in the call for disaster recovery. Well, of the thousands of people that came through our church and stayed, they said that they were there on Sundays. They heard these messages. They knew what we were doing. They said, Nelson, you need to write about this. And so in 2009, I did write a book that was more than a memoir. It had these principles in it. It told the Katrina story. It was called Nehemiah Response, How to Make It Through Your Crisis. So from that book, when I was doing my mentor coaching with Val Hastings, one of those 10 times, there's 10 one-hour sessions that you have with a mentor coach. He said, Nelson, how could you repurpose that book that you wrote for coaching? And so that got me to thinking. I'd never thought about it. And as I thought about it, these principles emerged, and the book Nehemiah Response, a coaching model, came about, as well as this model that we're going to share with you today, and has been a help and an encouragement for pastors to take a coach approach to their ministry, for consultants to add coaching to what they already do as a consultant, etc. And so this is Val Hastings at the top of the screen there. That's his picture. And he wrote in the book the foreword and also a recommendation saying that this book is going to help leaders to be able to take a coach approach and get traction. He emphasized in the things that he was saying about individuals or groups that are feeling stuck, saying that this might not only help them to get unstuck and move forward, but then also to get in the right lane, or get out of maybe the lane that they're in, get into a new lane and move forward in a new lane. So the whole idea of moving forward. Bob Logan is another good friend of ours, and he read the book and wrote these words that are here, just emphasizing the transformation that this model brings about. We call it a transformational model. So there is transaction. So we know that as we work with people, that to have goals and outcomes is something that's so important. But how do we move beyond transaction to transformation? This model helps to do that. So there'll be some emphasis, as Bob highlights here, about transformation. I mentioned earlier that David Wetzel was my first connection with NCD, we did, both my wife and I did training. We did the 2 levels with David. And his review is on the back cover of the book. Here's the book here. And on the back, David said, let's see, where's it at here? He said, "This book will stir your heart and cause you to reflect deeply about God's calling on your life and the legacy of your work." David Wetzler, Church Smart Resources publisher. So I'm grateful for these connections and the encouragement that they've been in my life. So just a little bit more about who we are and what Relevant Ministry is. So as we continue with that Katrina story, I continued in the pastorate till 2012, where I was. In 2008, we started Relevant Ministry. And as missionaries, there were a number of ministers that began to become a part of Relevant Ministry, like Jesse is today, as we've transitioned into a coach training organization, not only here on the coast, but we've ministered and done training in, what's it been, Jesse, 12 or 13 countries around the world where we've done training. God has just been we just step back and we're just in awe at how it is that God has been working. So we are a biblically based interdenominational ministry. We equip leaders to minister relevantly in healthy and thriving churches. We do that in the States, what we call beyond our borders. We do that both on site, which we're not able to do to the extent that we were even anticipating this year. I had been to Mexico, Jesse and I, both in January of this year. I was in the Philippines in February, and I was glad I got back. I returned on March the 1st, and that's when things were just beginning to ramp up. We would have been on about 8 other trips this year had it not been for the coronavirus. We've though been able to keep up with the training online in those places. So we're grateful. We're going to get into the model on the next slide. Just want to share, as we're talking about who we are, what we do, there are some trainings that are coming up. As we do coach training, there's a niche that we focus on at Relevant Ministry, and that's discipleship. And so there are 2 courses that we've written. One is a 24-hour certificate in discipleship coaching, and that teaches not only coaching, but then a discipleship pathway. And participants end up with a plan to implement discipleship with a coach approach in their ministry. And it's just exciting to see how God has used that. In fact, I had a call this Monday morning with a pastor at a church in Cairo, Egypt. And he had heard about the ICF and coaching, and he was Googling coaching and discipleship, and he found us, sent an email, and we had a first call with him Monday morning, and he's going to be a part actually of both of these classes this fall. The professional coach training is 40 hours, and those 64 hours is the training that's required by the ICF to get your ACC credential, the training requirement. This model, we teach a class that's 4 hours. So today we've got an 1.5-hour workshop. This class dives a little bit deeper into the model that we're going to be looking at today. So let's bring the model up here, and we want to talk about it. Let me just do a check-in, see if everything's all okay. I've kind of been focused on speaking and the information, and I really haven't been looking at the slides out there to see you. What a good group that we have here today. Let me just check in and see if there's any questions or something that I could clarify at this point before we take a next step.
see some thumbs up, and
I did see a thumb up. Yeah, okay, good.
There's no questions in the comments, but certainly, yes, if anyone has a question briefly to unmute, but if not, keep
Jesse's gonna watch that comment box, and so that's one good way that you can interrupt me. And then Jesse, if you see something and I don't catch it, you go ahead and call it out and stop me. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So if you have the handout page, you have this model there, and we're going to learn what this preferred future, present situation, what it's all about. What's the incubation all about? So that's the analogy of a mother hen that sits on the eggs waiting for the right time for it to hatch. That's the incubation, implementation, and then celebration and transformation. So here's some things that you can expect now in our time together, is that you'll learn a coaching process that can facilitate you coming alongside a person or a team and help them to discover their preferred future, and then to develop a plan to move forward into that. Another outcome today can be to gain confidence about having coaching conversations with others, and then using these principles of Nehemiah that we're going to learn today, as Nehemiah was challenged with the rebuilding of the wall around Jerusalem. So let's talk about coaching for just a minute. And then we want to identify all of those places on the model. So just a little bit more about coaching. Here are 3 definitions, and I'd like for you to think about what are the words that just jump out at you. And I'm going to read each one and stop after each one and just hear from you what intrigues you. So coaching, this is the International Coaching Federation. They say coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So go ahead and unmute. And what strikes you? What word jumps up? Feel free to unmute. Who'll be first?
Mr. Mark typed in the chat, maximizing potential. Mark
Maximizing
Adams.
potential. Yeah. Okay, good. What else do you see that's really significant or jumps up?
I really love the partnering aspect.
Partnering, yeah. Side-by-side partnering. Yeah, thank you, Christoph.
Christoph, as you were saying the word partnering, Bert typed in partnering.
So, yeah, okay, great. We're getting
that's the German perspective here.
Very good.
Good. Thanks, Bert. Yeah. In fact, feel free to just even unmute right now. I don't think we'll get any feedback, and then it will almost be like we're around the conference room table together and we can just even have conversation. So it's not like just switching back and forth on and off. Feel free to unmute right now during these next 2 definitions, and we'll just kind of talk together. Click that unmute if you feel free doing that. Here's what J. Val Hastings says. He says, as a coach, I help people get the results that they want by bringing out the best in them in a developmental and discovery-based process.
Helping people get the results they want.
The results that they want. Yeah, was that Vincent?
That was Neil.
Neil. Okay, yeah, thank you, Neil. Yeah, great. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, what else here in Val's definition stands out?
Peter?
Okay.
Yeah,
maximizing their personal and professional potential.
Yeah.
That's putting the bar, the goal very, very high. In my experience, what is someone's personal maximum is out of sight, and I am happy with small steps to take in that direction already. Yeah. So for me, it's a little bit too big words. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Peter, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. What and what else?
Bringing out the best in them.
Lynn, thank you. Yeah, bring out the best in them. You know, making discovery, bring out the best in them. So one of the things we're going to learn about coaching that's different is that a coach doesn't tell. They're not a prescriber. A coach instead asks open-end questions, and Kjetil mentioned that earlier, open questions. And I don't know if I quite had the first name right when I said it, but you know who I'm talking to, that you said open questions. And so the difference is a closed question is it doesn't, create curiosity. They just say yes or no. Did that go well today? That's a closed question. So how did it go? How are things going? That opens it up so that they can begin to ask questions. So what is it that is challenging you right now? And so again, you're drawing out with these open-ended questions. Here's what Bob Logan says. What intrigues you about his definition of coaching? He says that it's a process of coming alongside a person to help them discover God's agenda for their life and ministry, and then cooperating with the Holy Spirit to see that agenda become reality. What do you like about what Bob says?
All three of them have this one idea of process or one thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil. Anyone else?
Digging on the idea of discovery.
Yeah, right. And so, Mark, we're gonna definitely keep raising up the role of a consultant, but there's a lot of pressure sometimes on a consultant. You get that NCD survey, and it's like then as a consultant, many times there's the pressure that I have all of the answers to interpret this thing and give them the right solution. Now there definitely is that is a part of what we do. What might happen if we would also include discovery? What might we find out? We can't get inside their brain and know everything about like what's going on. But if we can ask the right questions, it may be that we'll even discover things as the consultant as we ask some open-ended questions. And so things like around that score on your empowering leadership, what's really going on here? What are the challenges that you're facing? So questions like that, instead of like, I got to come in with all the answers and say, here's what I think's happening, and sometimes, we need that, but as we put this coaching tool into our tool chest, how might it be helpful as we work with people? So as we keep thinking about coaching here, let's make the distinction of the uniqueness of these different aspects of really everybody on the call, who you are. So there are those of you who are counselors, there are those of you who are mentors, your consultants. As we would put coaching next to it, what might be the distinctions? So around counseling is more about recovery. It's going back. Coaching is about discovery. Okay, so do we need counselors? Yes. Do coaches refer people to counselors? Yes. If it is that someone's stuck and they have issues in their past that it's going to be necessary for them to deal with in order to move forward, a referral to a counselor for a period of time can be very helpful for someone that you're working with. And then they come back to you when they're ready to move forward and make that discovery. The analogy that I've heard sometimes is that a counselor is like an archaeologist, and a coach is like an architect. So as you think about those two analogies, so we're moving into that building and the future and something new that's being discovered and designed. So mentoring, is there a place for that? You better believe it. A mentor, as we would distinguish between the two, a mentor has great answers for your questions. So as I might walk with someone, mentoring them, they're going to have some questions, and I've got life experience that I can speak about that and help them with that. I can take it further if I add some coaching to it, and I have some great questions for answers that they might be able to wrestle with. It's almost, as we think about critical thinking, it's almost challenging people to think, and to think critically, not to be critical, but to do critical thinking and really individually go through that process. Then a consultant provides solutions. And so, yes, there's a place for that. A coach helps that leader or that focus group that you're working with or that team at a church to make plans and to move forward. So the next slide is going to take us to the model. We're going to begin looking at it. Let me just pause right here and just see if around coaching and these distinctions, as we look at the uniqueness, any clarity that would be helpful or questions that you have.
I will step in and say, Mark typed in, he said, after years of coaching, counseling, and mentoring, I've decided we do moaching, so kind of a combination of, and Mark, if I could make a suggestion to add, we could call it moachling. So there's the mentoring, coaching, and counseling. And certainly as men and women in ministry, we do need a combination of that for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Good.
And then Gary also wrote in, the best thing a coach hears from a client is, wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I agree. Maybe it's a prideful thing, but I too love hearing that when someone says, that's a great question.
That was a great question.
Let me stop and think about that. You're onto something.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else out of the group, either in the chat or open up your mic, questions that you might have, something that might be helpful clarification at this point?
And one last comment, and Nelson, and I think we can move on. Juan also said it's helpful to make it so clear. So seeing it in this clear form sometimes can be a good reminder, even if we're a PCC, MCC, to remember we got to be able to put on and take on off our hats when the Holy Spirit is leading us to do one of these or a combination. So great point.
Great. So here's the model. This model provides a process that's reproducible, that's repeatable. It's a strategic framework for positive change. I have people ask, how long does it take to work through the model? So the answer is that it depends. So if we use it in a consulting or coaching, or we're doing coaching as we consult or mentor, if it's a coaching session, say it's 45 minutes long, you would work through this model for the most part in 45 minutes, and we'll become familiar with the different parts and how they are in different percentages at different times. Also, this model can work over a longer period of time. So like when we connect with churches and put a plan together for a 9-month process, this model will unpack in 9 months. There will be in that 9-month bigger cycle of all of the model, they'll be working through the model in shorter periods, working with different focus groups or leaders in that process of working with that church with NCD, strategic planning, and whatever the process is. I also, and many others have given testimony about how they're able to use it in just a minute or two personally to do self-coaching. And this is an interesting concept. So for example, if I've got a decision to make, I can pause and I can think, what's my preferred future? What's happening right now? What kind of a plan can I put together? That's incubation. What action can I take? And I can work through, and it can help me with decision-making just in a few minutes. So the answer for how long does it take to work through the model would be, it depends upon the particular setting. So on the sheet, if you have the sheet, so that we can identify the different parts, you have a pen or pencil, put a number 1 by preferred future out there at number 1, preferred future. Present situation, put a number 2. Then incubation, number 3. Implementation 4, celebration 5, transformation 6. All right. So now as I do that, we're identifying a linear process. Okay. And so this model does work linearly. It's the best way to learn it, is to learn it linearly. What will happen once you become familiar with the model, it's like you just almost live it. So of really the thousands of people that we've taught this model to, the coaches that use it, they're able to have that picture in their head of like where they're at. And I call it a dance. So it could be that you've moved through towards implementation and you're asking an open-ended question like, what will be your first steps? It might be that depending upon their answer, you may want to go back to something that would be about a preferred future and give reference to, so now what were, and what I help them to, so what were the specific things that you were hoping to achieve? And how does that link with what action you're going to take? So you see where you can, once you've learned this linearly, you can dance back and forth into these different places. So I call it a dance because it's almost like that. Like when you learn dancing, you sometimes even put feet on the floor. You know, I'm going to go step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's pretty rigid and strict. And so that's the linear part of learning the model. And then once you've learned it, wow, you just flow freely through the model. But yet what the model is going to do is it's going to give you like guardrails to stay on track through those alpine roads. You know, as you go up and down the roads, the guardrails are going to be there as you take a journey in partnership with the person that you're coaching or the group that you are leading. All right, so the model is 2 parts. The metaphor of the model is first of all a line, and that's so we could see that these two, the circle and the pathway, is not, they're not one piece. They're 2 different parts. The circle though is kind of enmeshed into the line. You'll see that, and there's reason for that because that's the possible stuckness. You see also that the circle isn't a perfect circle. So life isn't perfect. So it's not, you know, a perfect circle. So there are 2 parts. And if we were to draw a stick figure of ourselves or the person that we're coaching, it would be right on top of the number 2 that we wrote down. That's present situation. That's where you are right now. And sometimes we need some help with that. So preferred future is where it is that we're going. Present situation is where it is that we are. So out here, let's imagine that you're meeting with a church and you are reviewing their survey results. So you're giving them insights and helpful instruction as a consultant. So you're, for example, looking at maybe passionate spirituality. And here's the number. Here's where it was a year ago. Here's where it is 2 years ago. So you've studied it. You've done some work. You come in. You're giving them some information. Let me just ask the group, what would shifting to a coach approach look like? What might be a question that you would ask?
What do you see?
Yeah, what do you see? Mhm. Lynn, why might that be important to hear that from them?
From a consultant perspective or a coach perspective,
Well,
we
yeah,
have no
well,
idea.
either one, just you as you work with them. Yeah, and you're using both skills. How will
We
that
have
coaching?
no idea. We have no
Well,
idea what's going on in their mind, what their
yeah,
perception is, if this is a good result, if this is a devastating result,
yeah.
how it's impacting them,
What,
what they're desiring to see, where they're desiring to be.
yeah.
So it just creates an opportunity for them to begin to paint a picture, and
What's
we
going?
can see something of what they're interpreting,
Yeah, that's so
and also
good.
what they're anticipating.
What they're thinking. So after Lynn's question, what might be another coach question that you could ask? So they share what they see. What could you do as a coach to drill even a little bit deeper?
I would like to ask you a question,
Oh, okay.
and that is, are you on number 2 or number 1? In other words, are you talking about a preferred future or a present situation?
That's a good question. Yeah. So let's say that it is preferred future, what we see on the screen here, and so you've discussed that passionate spirituality score, and Lynn says that I can ask a coach question, what's going on? Then as we're thinking about preferred future, how could we take that further as a coach? And Neil, that is a definitely important. We need to know what we're, where we're going for, so that preferred future.
The reason why I asked that is because I have been lost in a strange city. I knew where I wanted to get to. But the first question, when I rang the people I wanted to find, the first thing they asked me was, where are you now?
Where are you?
So I knew where my preferred future would be.
Yeah.
But they had to know where I was now to be able to direct me to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Let's talk about that too. So then that would be like, if we was going to start to dig into present situation, what could we ask Neil? What could be a good question?
You could ask him, what does the landscape look like around you? What do you see?
What do you see? Yep. What's happening? Just even 2 words. What's happening? Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. To make discovery. Neil, that's a great observation. In order to get to where we want to go, we gotta know where we are. And so that's questions around the present situation. So things that you're familiar with in NCD, there's the APA analysis. What do you want to achieve? So that APA. So those could be some tools that you could use in preferred future. Some tools that you could use in present situation could be, if you're familiar with the SWOT analysis, that an acronym, SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So you don't even necessarily have to do a SWOT, but you could ask some questions. So what are the challenges right now in present situation? What is it that's really happening? What are the things that you notice that you're really strong in? So you can really be making discovery, and without even doing a formal SWOT analysis, as a coach sitting down with someone along, just side by side, one-to-one, those can be some powerful questions that happen in present situation. So we have in the model, as we understand the model here, we have the preferred future, where we want to go. And then, like Neil said, when we want to give somebody directions in a city, we got to say, where are you right now, so that I can give you right directions for where you want to go and create that path. So what we see here is a gap that's in between. How do we fill the gap? And so we've identified that number 1, preferred future, present situation, and then the gap is working what we call the stages of Nehemiah's responses. And he first incubated. In just a little bit, Jesse's going to take us to scripture and Nehemiah, and we're going to see where this happened for Nehemiah. And whether we even mention Nehemiah or not, whether we talk about the principles, it's like as we work incubation, as we think it, the power of the responses of Nehemiah, which are principles that work in this model, they are going to happen as we work these different stages. So there's first then that incubation, and then implementation. We see that it's upward and forward momentum. So it's like this is where the heavy lifting happens. We might spend more time in this incubation. We might come back there to make more discovery. This is where vision takes place. This is where, what is it that God is doing? This is like, what are your fears? And then in implementation, what are you going to do? As they get challenged, how will you meet that challenge? Or even what do you know the challenges will be, and how will you anticipate that? What action will you take to work through challenges that you know that you're going to face? And then celebration is coming down. And sequentially, we see all of this happening. This is after the wall. At the very top there, the wall was built, and then they celebrated. And I see that kind of like the roller coaster coming down from the top and hands up in the air, and we're celebrating, and then there is transformation. So that's the model. We'll take another pass through in just a moment. Let me pause and just see if there's any questions. And then I want to share, along with Jesse here, these 3 techniques. I want to highlight these for just a moment or two. So any questions or something that would be helpful clarification for where we're at right now?
I like the simplicity of the model. It's a good framework. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, praise God. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Anything else right now? So now when you do professional coach training, there are going to be a total of 8 core competencies that you will learn. Those competencies are skills. It'll be part of your training. And those 8 core competencies will make up, as you become adept at the skill of coaching, all 8 of those would be the component parts of your 40-minute, your 30-minute, your 50-minute coaching session with a person. We've listed 3 here, and we want to just pause and see the importance of each one of these, and elevate them. And like, just for us, maybe this could be, as we start thinking about coaching, how would I evaluate myself? So this, while Jesse and I are just sharing a few things here, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, what kind of a listener, powerful question asker, what kind of an action accountability person am I? So Jesse, why is listening important in the coaching process?
Yeah, certainly in coaching, particularly where we're using that, and we've talked about some of these other things with consulting and mentoring, and listening is important there, but specifically within coaching, we know who is the conversation led by. It should be led by the coachee or the client, if you use that term, or you're walking through the NCD survey. It's the church health team. They're the ones that are driving this, and so really being able to listen to them. So that then, and specifically as men and women of God, then we listen to the Holy Spirit. And so it's listening to them, it's listening to the Holy Spirit. And we all know, we've all seen the statistics, right, that over 90% of communication is nonverbal. So we're not listening just for what's being said, but what's not being said, body language, pace, tone. Mark asked a question that he said that he often likes to start saying, what about this gives you hope? What makes you feel afraid? And he says this allows for feeling and the emotional processes. And so being able to listen for some of those things. And So as we listen, then we're really able to follow them. And we've talked about dancing through the model. We're allowing them to kind of lead the dance, so to say, as we follow their lead.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So listening, different than hearing. When I was a child at home, my mom would say, Nelson, and when she would say Nelson Jr., so my dad's name is Nelson, she'd say Nelson Jr., did you hear me? Yeah. And so sure, yeah, I heard you, but did I really listen? Did I know what it was she was saying and what it was that she wanted me to do? So it's more than just auditory. It's much deeper than all of that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put yourself? Powerful questions. We talk about that open-endedness of questions. Jesse, any other thoughts just around powerful questions before we go to the next one?
Yeah, this is where the listening then shapes our questions, and especially during a time like the virus has hit different countries different ways, but right now maybe you're feeling like I just keep asking leaders the same questions, and so maybe we fall into patterns. It's good to have kind of a list of questions that maybe we lean on or borrow from, but it's those powerful questions that really evoke discovery. It's those powerful questions that really lead to them being able to kind of paradigm shift. We use that question. What is it? What might this look like from the other side of the room? And so using imagery, those types of things. And it's in that time that we're really, through those questions, helping them generate options. And so powerful questions are just a great tool. And just like listening, being learned, powerful questions, as we all know, is a learned skill. And so we practice. And that's what Val says, the best way to get better at coaching is coach. And so asking those questions.
Yeah, that's good. And then action and accountability. This actually just happens out of celebration. And we'll see that in just a minute here when we get to celebration, when we're working with someone. So primarily the majority of what we do is we train around discipleship coaching and how a church can implement a discipleship process and train their people to take a coach approach that actually multiplies. And so with the relevant discipleship pathway out there, there are grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren because of the coaching process that multiplies it. And on that celebration part, it's a question like next time that we get together, what would you like to share with me? So around discipleship, if someone chooses prayer, they say, I want to really focus on prayer the next couple of weeks. Normally what we would do in discipleship is we say, okay, here's what you need to do. We would take on responsibility and tell them what to do. But in the coach approach, we would say, well, what would be most helpful for you the next couple of weeks? And let them design a plan. And it could be just totally different than what we would have ever guessed or prescribed for them. And then around that plan, the action and accountability, how certain are you that the goal that you set, that's reasonable these next couple of weeks? Oh, I can do that. I want to do this. And they agree with the plan that they put together. And then, so when we get back together in 2 weeks, what would you like to share with me around the plan that you're going to practice for prayer? What would you like to share? And so what they're doing is they're making themselves accountable. And so that's what happens in coaching, is that many times the responsibility of the counselor session is upon the counselor. The responsibility of the consulting session is upon the consultant. Here in coaching, the responsibility is on their shoulders, and they commit to that plan. So 3, what we call techniques. So these 3 are part of, there's another 5 to make up the 8. These 3 we share in the discipleship coaching, and believers, when they take a coach approach, learn to be listeners, ask questions, and the whole action and accountability.
And
So,
Nelson,
yeah.
just one last thing on those three techniques. Now, I think it's really the action and accountability that kind of separates coaching apart from some of the, because even, you know, there are, as a mentor, as a consultant, we can use listening and powerful questions, but then, like you said, with the mentoring and consulting, then we kind of prescribe the plans. We've listened to you, we've asked some questions, now we know in the past what we've done, so we say, okay, go do this. But with coaching, then you say, okay, what are you going to do? And you really help them design their own action plan, and then through that, that's where the accountability comes. And so Dan typed in, I think it's a great point. It's important to remember, since coaching is client-oriented, we coach the person, not necessarily the problem. And that's where we really, and that's so moving from that transactional to transformational. And that's where this model is so helpful. And that's where we start to focus not just the what of it, but really the who, or the who-ness of the person that we're coaching. And so Dan, great reminder to focus not just on that transaction, just that problem, but really the person. So
that's great, Jesse. Thanks for sharing that. These next couple of slides here line up with the page that you have, so I'll be able to click through these fairly quickly. In the beginning, to have some questions might be helpful, just some kind of prime the pump kind of questions, and that's what these are. In no way does this limit you. In fact, around asking the questions, something that you will learn as a coach. Now, in the beginning, I got to tell you, I was not here, and I'm not always here. But the best questions are formed after the person that you're coaching has stopped talking, and then you think, and then you put back that question. So then what you're doing, so here's what happens many times, is that while they're talking, or at least this was me, while they're talking, you're thinking, what's the next question? What's the next question? And I miss what they're saying. So from these prime the pump questions, you as a coach will become proficient at designing questions. And you may already be there. You may already be experiencing this, that I don't have to be thinking about what am I going to ask them while they're talking. I can 100% be present and listen to all that they're saying. And then when they're done, form the question and ask that question. And so these are some questions, again, they're on the page here, and we can see that when we're at a preferred future, what would you like to focus on today? So present situation. So tell me about what's happening. And then we move into these stages and begin to get some traction based on all of that. So what would you like to accomplish? What's your plan, etc.
And Nelson, if I can interrupt you as you're going through this, there was a comment question from Bert. He said, you know, especially as NCD, and if I'm not saying that, if I'm not paraphrasing this correctly, Bert, please step in. But NCD coaches, typically we're working with teams, not just one person, and how this might be harder because of different perspectives, different personality types, and so forth. So maybe as you're walking through these questions and explaining the model, you know, we are focusing a little bit on one-to-one, but this model certainly can be used in groups, and that's the flexibility of it. So maybe speak to that just a little bit, how you've used this model within NCD surveys, but just in general as you've worked with groups.
So you've got your focus group together. People have been put together by the lead pastor or whoever organized that, and you have your meetings. Really, I think the big difference is that you transition from individual to the team as a whole. And when you work with the team, it may take a couple of times together for the team to gel. So when you do team coaching, there's two approaches to take. There is to coach individuals within the team, or to coach the team. So in most cases, as you work like with a focus group, you're going to coach the team. You want that team to gel so that they get united. They've worked through the forming and the storming, and they're norming, and you're beginning to, coach the whole group. And the things that they begin to respond with are because they've gotten on the same page. So coaching can be very powerful. what can happen too is that people within the team can piggyback off of each other or bounce off of each other with what was just said. You as a coach can say, how does the rest of the group feel about what Jim has just said? And so you're building consensus. So yeah, coaching can be very powerful with teams. And so then after incubation, it's taking action. After taking action, then we celebrate, and then we have transformation. Jesse's going to share where it is that the Nehemiah scriptures fit into the model. Let me just say a word about transformation, because that's the last place that we see here. This is something that the model really highlights. And here on the coast, this is the coastline where Jesse and I live. I said earlier, we experienced Hurricane Katrina at one time before the storm. This was one of those beautiful live oak trees that the moss hangs down from. If you've seen pictures of trees like that, this was one of those trees. It was a tree that actually saved the life of 3 people. They strapped themselves to this tree when it was alive. And the storm surge here in this place was at 40 feet. So storm surges were the 120, 140 mile an hour winds that are constant for 7-8 hours, comes up and it pushes the water up. It was 40 feet above sea level here. And so the water was up to where these people were tied to the tree. They did not perish though. After the storm, there were chainsaw artists that came, and it was just so beautiful how people with all kinds of skills came to be a help and an encouragement. And the chainsaw artists were an encouragement, taking old trees like this that were ruined by the storm. The salt water and the winds ruined many of those beautiful trees, but they carved beautiful things out of it. Now, this is known as the angel tree. So you can see angels there. And so what happened was a person who actually lived through the storm and was one of the 3 that was tied to that tree was there when a chainsaw artist was going to do something with this tree. And the suggestion from the person was, if you can carve angels, and for the most part, there's like porpoises and seagulls and other sea life and animals, birds that are on these carvings along the 60-mile coastline of Mississippi along the Gulf Coast. And this person who survived from that tree said, if you can get an angel out of it, put angels. And this chainsaw artist was able to get 2 angels. So there was a time that our ministry hosted teams, and we did discipleship with these teams that came, and they helped with some of the work as an in-state mission trip. And we would take time when we would do a tour and have some teaching points at these places, and the teaching point here was transformation. So here it took the storm to batter against this tree, and then the masterful chainsaw artists to carve out what was already there. So this angel wasn't added to the tree, it was already there. He carved it away. And so the same way in our lives, as we go through circumstances, challenges in our life, God is at work, and the desire is beyond transaction, transformation through the sanctifying, powerful work of the Spirit of God in our life to transform us. A friend of mine who is a psychologist and in the psychology department at Wheaton College in Chicago also wrote about the book, and Jamie Ayton said that he liked the model, that it's a how-to biblical transition process. The model integrated with social and behavioral sciences fits well with the trans-theoretical model, which proposes how we change. What I like about the Nehemiah Response coaching model is that it goes beyond behavior change to transformation. And so that would be where we would desire to go. And it's what can happen because of the Nehemiah responses and how it is that this model is more than just a template or a design, but that it was birthed out of a scriptural process. Jesse, walk us through how it is that the model connects with Nehemiah. You're muted up.
I am. So as Nelson said, that this does come straight out of scripture. And so we're going to walk through each step, and we'll see the passage that we really base kind of that step on. If you got your God's word next to you, I'll be reading through the Bible, but like I said, it is on the screen as well if you'd like to look there. And so in Nehemiah, as Nelson mentioned, this is, as we learn the model, and it can be effective linearly, but that we can we'll see that we can kind of dance through it. And, you know, as we think about that, thinking about preferred future, oftentimes, specifically like in discipleship, or maybe as a church, if they're struggling with small groups or they're struggling with worship, you might say, what would you like it to look like? And so many times they say, well, right now it's this. And they're really jumping to present situation. We don't stop them and say, no. Let them listen to them and then say, okay, so what would you like that to look like? Or what might that look like? And so, but we will walk through this and see where this comes through in this kind of linear fashion. And so in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 5, we see where it says, Nehemiah is talking to the king, and he says, send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. So we see here Nehemiah's preferred future is that he wants to rebuild the wall. He'd like to rebuild the wall. And so he knows where he's wanting to go. I've heard the quote, that says that if I aim at nothing, I will hit it every time. If I aim at nothing, I'll hit it every time. So we need to know where we're going. As we're walking down the street, it's not too effective when we close our eyes. We need to have our eyes open because we need to know where we're going. And so whether it's a personal life, whether it's a group setting, this can be big picture. Many of you lead ministries or businesses, you lead families. This can really, even when we talk about casting vision, that as a leader, you need to be casting that vision. That's your job as a leader, is to be casting that big picture vision, that preferred future. Where are we going? And I've heard it said too, if you as a leader are not casting the vision, then you're opening up the door for others to cast that vision. And then you can be going in a million different directions. So organizationally, but then also in a personal life. What do you want to see your personal life, your personal spiritual life to look like? So big picture, but also right now, this can be small steps. Today, what would you like to accomplish? And so that's the power of this model, is it can be used for simple decisions, even planning out your day, planning out trips, but then so small things, but also big things. So there's the preferred future that we see represented in Nehemiah. Flipping back just a little bit in chapter 1, verse 3, we see this is the present situation where it says, and they said to me, the remnant there in the province, the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned down. So his present situation was that he found out that the walls had been destroyed. The city had been destroyed. And so this was his present situation. And so why this is key within coaching and using this model is that we need to know where we're going. And so, to get where we're going, we need to know where we're at. Nelson kind of alluded to it earlier, but even thinking how many of you have learned Zoom or learned Zoom better over the last couple months, or had people that you've kind of had to I see some head shaking, right? If you're trying to get someone to log on to Zoom for the first time, and maybe they call you or text you and say, I'm trying to get on this dumb call, I can't do it. I've tried that. Usually the first question you ask them is, well, what's on your screen now? Or what do you see? Because to give them instructions of how to be able to log in, to how to get on that call, you need to know what their present situation is. Because if you start telling them to, just unmute, and they say, I'm not even on the call, I can't unmute, then you're not helping them because you're trying to start at a different present situation than they're at. So it's super key for us to know where we are. In order to get where we're going, we need to know first where you are. And so those questions of what's happening right now, what's your current reality, what's really happening, and so even get through some of those limiting beliefs or some of those things is what's really happening right now. We see the present situation. So for Nehemiah, after he learned his present situation, he took time to incubate, and we see that in chapter 1, verse 4. It says, "When I heard this, I sat down and wept. I mourned for days, fasting and praying." And it's so key to see that Nehemiah, and that's why we call this the Nehemiah Response coaching model, not the Nehemiah reaction model. Because Nehemiah didn't just say, man, I want to do this, I'm going to go start working. He might have gotten burned out. He probably would have run out of materials. He wouldn't have had help. But he took time to seek God's direction. And we know that if we look at chapter 1, verse 1 and chapter 2, verse 1, that this was about 100 days that Nehemiah took to pray and fast, or what we identify as incubation. And so the reason that Nehemiah did this, and the reason why this is so important for us personally in our lives, but then to also help those that we're coaching, is that it's so key to start right. If we make a good step out of order, then it can be a wrong step. And so we need to get started right and really hear, God, what are you sensing? Where do you want me to go? What are you working in this situation? And then respond to that. And this is also, as the coach, this is really where we begin to build trust with that person or that group that we're coaching, is helping them, allowing them to take time, not rushing them, not giving them the answers. And so this incubation phase is really where we can come alongside them through listening to them, through asking those questions, and that we then begin to help them to see things maybe from a little bit different perspective, and allow them to process through what God's saying to them. And as we mentioned earlier, that's a great question. If someone says, that's a great question, and then there's silence, man, that's home run. Silence is one of the best things, because a good and powerful question should lead to thought-provoking silence, right? So that time of incubation. So as we keep tracking through the model, we see the phase of implementation. So as we said, Nehemiah took about 100 days to incubate, to hear from the Lord. And when he had heard from the Lord, he said, this is what we're going to do. And then in verse 18, those that he's rallied says, we're with you, let's get started. So they rolled up their sleeves, ready for the good work. And so it wasn't just, okay, now I know what I want God to do, but hey, let's get it done. Let's get to work. And so this is where we really have to identify what's that first step going to be. We need to be able to know what the first step is going to be. So it's good to plan ahead. We plan backwards. Those are all part of it. But if we never take that first step, we're never going to get going. And this is where people sometimes get stuck. And, well, I just don't know what to do, or I don't know what's going to happen after that. I was on a webinar recently, and he was saying that sometimes we just need to make a step, and if it's wrong, then God will reveal that to us and allow ourselves to make some mistakes, and that's okay. But we have to make that first step, and through that incubation, that's where hopefully we're taking that right first step. And so as we can read all throughout chapter 3 and 6 that we see the implementation of Nehemiah and those rebuilding the wall. And a couple things that's really important to notice in the story, the recount of Nehemiah, is that opposition came. And so we can have the right plan, and we still might face opposition. They face spiritual opposition. They faced physical opposition to the point that they were working with one hand and holding their weapon with the other hand. And so just because we're facing opposition, or because a group says this is tough, that doesn't mean that it's the wrong plan. And so if we're implementing our plan, and that's why it's so certain to know, hey, God is in this, because opposition may come, but we're going to forge ahead. And one of the ways that Nehemiah was able to face that opposition, what's important to understand is teamwork. So in our plan, that's where we talk about who's going to come alongside you, who can you be accountable to. Teamwork is so important. Nehemiah didn't try and go out and build the whole wall himself. Different families, different groups built different sections of the wall. So Nehemiah had the plan. Nehemiah said, we're going to do this, but then the team got it done together. And so we move from implementation, and we see celebration specifically in chapter 8. There's other places where we can see them celebrating, but specifically in chapter 8, verse 12, it says, "So the people went off to feast, eating and drinking, and including the poor in a great celebration." And the celebration, if we would keep reading in chapter 9, verse 18, we see this was 7 days of celebration. They stopped to celebrate. They hit the pause button to savor the win. They stopped in the midst of the busyness, in the midst of of life, to say, wow, this is what God is doing. And I think particularly in churches, as we work with church leaders all across the globe, we hear this so often, that this is maybe where we fall short sometimes. We don't stop to celebrate what God is doing, specifically the small things, to celebrate small things. And where we see that, and what we see that's important here in chapter 8, is if we look back in chapter 7, verse 4, we see that it says they still had homes to rebuild. So they weren't done. There was still much rebuilding to be done. But they stopped and celebrated that they had made progress. They stopped and celebrated what God was doing physically, but also in the lives of the people. And that's what leads us to transformation. In chapter 9, verses 1 and 3, it says this: "Then the people of Israel gathered for a fast, wearing burlap and faces smudged with dirt as signs of repentance. They confessed and worshiped their God." So we see that through this process, there was a physical restoration. There was a physical transformation. But as a nation, they had turned from people that their hearts were hard, and they had turned from a people that were sinning. And we see that they were transformed into repentance. And they took time to really just celebrate that and recognize the transformation that was happening in their life. And so as we've tracked through this model, one last point that I just want to mention, and if we look in chapter 6, verse 16, it says, "So the wall was completed in 52 days. Now, if you remember earlier what I said, and we see in verse 1:1 and 2:1, that Nehemiah took time to plan and hear from God for 100 days. And the implementation took 52 days, almost half the amount of time. Excuse me. Now, that's certainly that's not a formula per se, that there should always be 2 for 1. But what we see in that is just how important it is to get started right, how important it is to know where we're at, how important it is to know what those small steps are, because then when we do that, then we can make we can make incremental growth. There's a quote by Albert Einstein that he said, "If I was faced with a life or death situation and had to make a decision, and I had an hour to decide it," he said, "I would spend the first 55 minutes figuring out the right question to ask. For when I knew the right question to ask, I'd be able to solve the problem." And so Albert Einstein was a pretty smart guy. And what we see here in Nehemiah as well is the importance of right planning, but then not just coming up with a plan saying, let's implement this. Through that, celebrating what God is doing, and stepping back to realize, man, we are a transformed person. We are a transformed group. And now our preferred future has become our present situation. And that's why we see those arrows, that then we don't stop there. We say, what's the next step going to be? What's my new preferred future? And you continue growing.
Yeah, that's good. Jesse, thank you so much. Hey, let's do a check-in and just see if there's any questions or something that could be clarified at this point. All right.
A tendency in fast-paced Western world is give me solution fast. So Nehemiah 100 days of praying fast and 53 days of implementation. Yeah. How does it fit into a fast-paced society?
Yeah, it was 100 of the incubation and 52 implementation. Yes.
Yeah.
But you're right. We do live in a fast-paced world where we want answers.
I give you 2 hours to meet with the church. I have that actually.
That's right.
But I like the model which I want to refer to. I want to show the biblical, steps that you present. That is a great start, I think.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bert. So we're really at the end here. Want to maybe see if there's takeaways that you have before we sign off. We want to go back to Christoph to close. Could we also, maybe before we take takeaways, how about getting a group picture here? It'd be just great to have everybody. If you could open up your videos so we could see you. And Jesse, could you do that? Do a screenshot there. Let's get on and everybody give a big smile, and Jesse and I will be able to share this with our wives. We'll be able to say, here's who we met with today.
That's right. All right. Well, on the count of three, 1, 2, 3. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for that picture.
Yeah.
And hey, there was one comment in the comment section or in the chat that I just, Skip said. He said, oh yeah, maybe we could do one more picture. He actually, Skip suggested maybe stopping the screen share so it's just the people, just us in the class. So we'll take one more picture.
Oh, did you have it? Did you have the screen share on it?
Yes.
Oh,
right.
you did? Oh, well, let me get rid of it here.
Yes.
Okay.
But also Skip also mentioned, he said, he sees Nehemiah as a leader and not so much a coach. And absolutely Nehemiah is the leader. And so what we see though, is that this develops a coaching model out of really the steps as a leader he followed. So as a leader, we can track our teams through this, but then we can take the principles from the leader of Nehemiah, and that develops the steps for a coaching model. So absolutely, he's an incredible leader, and certainly much for us to learn from.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. We'll do one more picture on the count of 3. Maybe I'll try German. I took some German class in high school, but here we go. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. All right. Well, good to be together today.
Yeah. So what takeaways might be there that you have today? What takeaways?
I'd say I personally love the linear desired future, current situation.
Yeah.
The circle with the, actually seeing the cycle in that you can see the two separately and the two integrated together.
Yeah. Good. On the screen are some classes coming up. If you know anyone who might be interested, that 4-hour class goes deeper with what we did today, and then also professional coach training. If you know of anyone that might be interested in any of those, Christoph, we'll go back to you. Lynn, thanks for your input there at the end. Christoph?
Yeah. I was reminded of a book that I was reading when I was maybe 20 years old, so last millennium. There was a book on Nehemiah, actually, more focusing on his leadership role, but that really inspired me to study psychology. And today I'm an organizational psychologist. I work as a coach, and actually, as you do, as a master coach and a mentor coach. So that really fascinated me, and I'm very thankful that you made this this transfer from Nehemiah to coaching, that combination. Yeah, thank you so much, Nelson. Thank you so much, Jesse. Very inspiring, and thanks to everyone being part of this group and being with us today. It's such a great group today from all continents, from so many countries. It's really fascinating. Wonderful. Thanks.
Great.
And I want to invite you to join us again on November 11th. Then we will have our next international coach community, and you will hear from us soon with the topic and the agenda.
Yeah, great. Blessings, everyone. Good to be with you today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your day. God bless.
Amen. God bless you guys.
Thanks very much.
You are welcome. Good being together with you today. Amen.